the clergy have a problem with burying him in Westminster? Was there an influence to the eulogy or the religious ceremony?
Okay, I did not set this question up, but I was prepared for it. This is the eulogy given at Darwin's funeral by the Reverend George Prothero, who was one of Queen Victoria's chaplains. And he preached that Darwin was the greatest man of science of his day, but he was so entirely a stranger to intellectual pride and arrogance that he stated with the utmost modesty opinions of the truth of which he himself was convinced, but which he was aware could not be universally agreeable or acceptable. I love this bit. Surely in such a man lived the charity which is the very essence of the true spirit of Christ. And so, by the time Darwin dies, the Church of England, for the most part, had long since made its peace. Now, the Church of England was, during the course of the 19th century, kind of riven with all sorts of different sort of parties. I mean, the Church of England spent most of the 19th century in a low-grade civil war, so not everybody in the Church of England made their peace with Darwin, but for the most part, they did. And Prothero's reaction isn't just the words of somebody who has to say nice because the guy is lying dead in a casket before you. You see other types of sermons, other people saying from the Church of England, making similar types of claims. And so it was not controversial to get Darwin in Westminster Abbey, despite what you might think.
If we can take one more question, we'll end with that, Doctor. Thank you.
So, sorry, forgive me, this is a little bit unfocused, but you are interested in the history of science, and the mention of Alfred Russel Wallace just kind of brings to mind, the great men theory of history, and particularly the history of ideas. Newton and Leibniz invent calculus at the same time. We would have eventually learned to fly without the Wright brothers. Some ideas arise when their time has come, and it could be argued that they would have been independent of their discoverers, because if not him, then someone else. Even Erasmus Darwin and some of his poems had kind of the germ of, people were talking about evolution for years. I guess my question is just, how do you feel about that?
Oh, I agree entirely. I mean, I love kind of these Darwin days and celebration of Darwin, because I think there's a whole range of different exciting things you can attached to this person's biography, but I think it does kind of distort our understanding of the history when we give so much credence to one sort of individual. I mean, and Darwin himself would be the first to admit this, that he was part of this larger community, and that he's building upon the research and the ideas and the collaboration and sometimes the conflict with a whole range of other people. And in fact, one of the criticisms I would make of even kind of studies of Darwin, although I think this isn't as true as it maybe been 20 years ago, but I think that a lot of times we don't even understand Darwin as well as we should, because by focusing entirely on Darwin, we miss what his friend Joseph Hooker is doing. I wrote my dissertation on Joseph Hooker, and one of the things that I did is I got so frustrated. You go into the index of a book on Darwin, and Hooker would be, all over the place. But every time you'd go there, it would be, and as Darwin said to Hooker, as Darwin wrote to Hooker. And so you almost got the impression that Joseph Hooker was some type of filing cabinet where Darwin would shove in sort of ideas. And my question is, well, what was Hooker interested in? What was Hooker saying back? Why did Hooker care? And then I think that once you did that, you got a deeper understanding of the environment in which Darwin was operating, but ultimately I think you understood Darwin better, because again, he wasn't just filing things in this passive individual. Hooker was pushing back and forcing them into certain directions. And I think to understand science as a community, not just as a few kind of marquee names. And I would also say, and this is really important, one of the things that you see in the history of science is only recently is you would see kind of the acknowledgement of the contribution of women. And some of this is because, because women were excluded, but they weren't excluded. I mean, they weren't ever allowed, very rarely if ever would be the names on the big books. But if you look at somebody like a Darwin Darwin was so dependent upon his wife and his daughter. Look at Joseph Hooker. He writes to his grandfather, "Why am I proposing to this woman?" Basically, he describes a research assistant. She can correct the proofs, and she knows the botany. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm kind of smitten with her, kind of as an afterthought. And so if you open it up, you can see a whole range of contributions that are absolutely essential to the production of natural knowledge that get buried if you only look at, a handful of big names.
And Rosalind Franklin was robbed.
And Rosalind Franklin, right. Yeah, that was certainly, in terms of Watson and Crick getting access to unpublished sort of data in the development of their model of DNA.
Thank you very much, Doctor. A round of applause for you.
Thank you. Have a lovely time. Thanks.
I appreciate your time and your really contribution to this day. I want to thank our audience very much for visiting us, and thanks for all the Muslimish volunteers who are working on the cameras. This will be broadcast. This is already broadcast live on Dearborn blog and on Muslimish, and it will be also available on YouTube and on the Muslimish site. Please follow us on social media and CFI Michigan to get our next events, and see you next time. Drive safely. Thank you.